Adult friendships, this is a topic that has been on my mind, but I wasn't able to articulate it and shape it quite how you did it. So here's what I want to know. Why do you think this topic is so important?
I think friendships are a really important fundamental part of our lives. We think that our romantic relationships are the most important. And while it's good to have a partner in our lives, it's not always the case for everybody, as we know that it's harder and harder to be in a relationship or a lasting relationship or a good, healthy relationship. So, ultimately, it's about your friendship groups, your friends who will stick with you till the end of your life if you're lucky. And of course, we have many different theories on friendship. Like, for instance, when somebody's in a relationship, they're likely to lose one friend or two because we can only maintain that many close relationships. And then there are also ideas that friendships last for sometimes a reason or a season. And sometimes, of course, like I said, if you're lucky, it will last you to the rest of your life. That's also contingent on whether it's a relationship that you actually like, right? So let's say you have a healthy relationship lasting with you till the end of your life. That's contingent on all parties growing together. So ultimately, we talk a lot about our family of origin. Sometimes we talk a lot about what's happening in our ancestry, right? We talk about our romantic relationships, but a really important part is also the friendships that we have, because they are part of our social support group. They also inform who we are. If we think about how as kids, we go off to school, right? And then that's where we develop a lot of our social skills, because families are actually growing smaller and smaller these days, right? And in the past, cousins and all would grow up together in many societies, but in a lot of modern and current industrial or advanced capitalist societies, families are incredibly nuclear these days. So schools are where you learn to make friends. And then as you go into teenagehood, your brain is developing in a way that prompts you to have your own identity, right? And this identity is always different from your family's. So who is your model then? Your social group. Hence, the importance of why we need to talk about friendships. And then, of course, there's this idea that I totally call bullshit on, that the older you are, the harder it is to make friends, because you're not consciously out there making friends. You're no longer in school where you're forced within a certain proximity and time and repeated experiences to become friends with a person. So some people say that when you leave school from your mid-20s onwards, it's harder and harder to make friends. And when you think about all these different ideas together, we think about actually friendship is something worth thinking about.
You say that we are very keen on developing a very independent identity, but at some point, the more we integrate ourselves into some sort of groups that are very focused on chasing agendas, we tend to lose that identity that we are so keen on keeping separate from everyone else's. So that's something that I definitely want to talk about. But before we get to that part, because I think that will lead on to a lot of other topics, I want to ask you, to your understanding, in your opinion, what does a healthy friendship look and feel like?
A healthy friendship is one where you feel safe to be yourself. And by saying when I say be yourself, I don't just mean authenticity without responsibility. So, let's get it clear first, okay? If I'm pissed off with you and I say a lot of bad things that's in my head, right? That's also authentic. Because my brain makes me think that way. So, so the safety to be yourself, to be able to express how you feel, express your boundaries, your preferences, and negotiate compromises. So, let's say you like to do this, I like to do that, let's meet in the middle. Some days let's do this, some days let's do that. The safety to be able to do that. The safety to, have values of your own, that while being able to take into consideration another person's values as well. So this is not about their safety in numbers. I need you to convert to my values or my ideas or my opinions completely. But rather, it's not even agree to disagree. We allow each other to have our own perspectives and be our own people. It's a relationship where generally your nervous system feels safe. You are not on tenterhooks. And, we talk a lot, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, right? When there's been an explosion in mental health awareness and ideas of gaslighting, toxicity, trauma, narcissism, psychopathy. So we talk a lot about toxic relationships and toxic friendships. There's a lot of awareness about this in societal vernacular. But what we don't talk much about is the idea of ambivalent friendships. And we're going to use here the idea of ambivalent friendships to contrast so that we understand what a healthy relationship is. So if you think about toxic friendship or any toxic relationship, is when it's net high in negative interactions and net low in positive interactions. You think about your good, healthy relationships, right? Net overall, it's low in negative interactions. It's high in positive interactions. Then we have our ambivalent relationships, which are high in both positive and negative interactions. And we think that toxic ones are just so bad, right? But actually, science has shown continuously over and over again, consistently, that it is your ambivalent relationships, whether it's friendships, romantic relationships, family origin, or work relationships, that are actually worse for your health because your body doesn't quite know what to do. Am I going to be faced with Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde today? So you're always on your toes. Your parasympathetic nervous system, the one that does rest and digest when you feel safe, is not switching on. Instead, your fight or flight, this, okay, let me prepare at any time, is switched on. So you may think that there might be some positivity, and so that's good. Actually, that's not good for you, because sometimes we use positivity as a way of excusing negative, bad, unhealthy, toxic behavior.
That's huge. And I don't think very many people do those sorts of what feels like very necessary calculations, but you really should. I would say that for me, it's very simple. If somebody is making me feel cornered, constantly ambushed in conversations, constantly neglected, like you said, the net positive, net negative. Like if constantly I walk away and I'm drained and I am not looking forward to a next conversation, I would walk away from a friendship. But it's easier when you are, as you said, like as an adult, like in this age, I'm 33, I feel like giving a second chance, giving a third chance, because it feels like it's not that easy now to make friends, not everybody feels worth your time anymore. Your time is more precious. You have more responsibilities. Having said that, and considering what we've discussed up to this point, this is why you also need to have a lot more clarity on what a healthy friendship feels like, so that you make the right choice and you don't keep, no matter how hard it is to make friends, you do not want to carry people on and on and on, people who are going to hurt your mental health.
Definitely. And I think one important thing is also to be aware that initially you don't really know people. Sometimes it takes time for people's true colors to emerge. So even, sometimes people get really upset with themselves because why didn't I detect this early on? I should be smart or brave enough, blah, 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 right? But then actually sometimes, it's not healthy to just immediately ghost or cut a person. That shows impulsive behavior, the inability to have difficult conversations or inability to negotiate boundaries, right? So if initially it's like the test phase, right? And it's like, you go to, when I go and buy lipstick in the counter, right? I will see different shades of red, for instance, and I want to see which red suits me well. So think about that as the test phase of a friendship. And don't beat yourself up just because you didn't see somebody's true colors straight away, because there are many reasons why it's hard to detect as well. Some people are good at hiding. Some people are bad at detecting. Well, when I mean bad at detecting, I mean some of us are just not very in touch with our body and our intuition. And, for instance, neurodiverse people have a lot of them are higher in the propensity to have this thing called alexithymia, meaning that they are cut off from their emotions. So they may feel something, but they don't know what they are feeling, or they don't even know that they are feeling it. And the good news is that this can actually be trained. Okay, or maybe on a bad day or a bad season, you meet somebody and you are kind of vulnerable. They're kind of nice to you because they're nice to people who are down in the dumps, right? And then you develop this friendship, this gratitude, and sometimes they also remind you about the good things they've done for you as well. So there's also the reasons why you may have found yourself in a situation where you realize, uh-oh, this person is not good for me. And think about this as well in this sense, right? Like, we are just still recovering from did COVID really happen kind of like, this strange time dilation field, right? So a lot of people are now telling me that, I like the friendships or the relationships I developed during COVID. Actually, they're very temporary. They were not that good or not that healthy, or I'm starting to see different sides of people. That's because we start things in unique circumstances. So take the personal blame away, but rather respect and honor your ability to step back and ask, based on everything I know right now, based on this discernible pattern or what I'm watching in behaviors and how my body is responding, is this good or bad for me? And can this be changed? Can this be transformed? Like if I say, oh, I'm not happy with this behavior, why do you have to say this? Can we do this instead? So this is your boundaries, right? This is your guidebook for telling people how I like to be treated, right? And if the person does not respect that or belittles you, that is your answer. But if the person is open to having a conversation, a sane, logical, respectful conversation, and they consistently treat you the way you need to be treated, like a decent human being from now on, then it is a sign that this is a friendship that's worth developing.
This is so, so, so huge. I cannot, like, literally every single friend that I've had has told me at some point in our friendship that I didn't expect you to be this person that has now emerged, because initially I would be too aloof. It's not one of my finer qualities, but when somebody is trying to build a friendship with me, because I'm so comfortable in my own company, I don't make the effort. I simply don't make the effort, which is, as I said, not one of my good qualities. I can be very lazy initially in the friendship. So you have to do all the work. And then I come across as aloof, sometimes a little bit snooty, sometimes very reserved, too quiet. But once the friendship gets deeper, I feel comfortable opening up. In fact, I want to open up because I'm starting to like the other person. I'm starting to trust them. More importantly, and then every single one of my friends has said that, oh, I didn't expect you to have this side to you, or be able to do this thing, or have this kind of fun with you. So I think I am someone who can safely say that never, like they say, you cannot judge a book by its cover, but then they also say that first impressions are everything. And then they also say that when somebody shows you who they are, believe them. None of that is absolutely true. You have to really dig into, people are
Oh,
complex. You have to
definitely.
dig into,
Yeah.
there's so many layers to them. But I will also say that, like, I've been friends with people 6 months into a friendship. I would be like, why am I still picking up their call? Why am I still talking to them? They don't treat me with respect. They are always saying mean shit about other people. But then I would bring that up with them. I would be like, okay, listen, you keep doing this thing, not cool. Please stop. And this is what I am more comfortable with. And they would change. They would actually make the effort, because nobody probably has pointed out that particular side to them. And once they look back at their own interactions, they would be like, oh yeah, I do that, and that's not very nice. I can't believe I've been doing that. And they'll change. So people are so quick to walk away. Maybe, like you pointed out, you have to really understand and have those communication. And if that communication goes well, like you can end up with something even healthier than what you had before you had that
Yeah.
conversation. But as you said, if they in turn laugh at you, or mock you, or you names, like people tend to do, oh, you're too sensitive, or this and that, and then that's your
Yeah.
cue to.
Or sometimes you see signs that a person starts to leak out over time because their facade is less controlled. Maybe because they're more comfortable with you, or they take it for granted, or maybe they're going through a period of high stress in their lives, so it's harder to keep things together, right? But then that's when you start to see more instances of these things leak out, and that also confirms a person's fundamental personality. So Robert Greene, the author who wrote the series called Mastery, Power, War,
Amazing,
love his
amazing
stuff.
guy.
I remember one of the things that he writes about is that people will slip, leaks come out. right? So when you see somebody who engages in schadenfreude regularly, and also a sense of a double standards. Sometimes you can even test a double standard. So if they keep doing one thing and you just test by doing the exact same thing very rarely and see how they act, or whether a person is actually happy for you. I think that's a really, really big one, because when people are unable to be happy for you, but instead start saying bad things about you, start demeaning you, playing you down, that again is a sign that these people will keep you small. And the only way to function in a place like that is to deem yourself and contort yourself to become smaller and smaller and smaller. And while you may think that is safe survival mechanism, that is not safe at all when you run into this kind of issue over and over again. So just because somebody wants you to deem yourself doesn't mean you should do that, because actually it's not safe. You're just making yourself live smaller and be smaller, and you shrink essentially.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. I think that's happening in the world. I would say I know people. There is someone like that in my life, who is only able to be friends with people who are sort of not their financial equal, not their social equal. It's the only way they can be friends with someone. Like, they don't like being challenged, and they don't like being like, they don't know what to do with people who are either better than them in some ways, which always happens. Everybody's better in some ways and not so much in some other ways. That's how friendship, in fact, that's, I think, would be a good friendship, where you can support
Yeah.
each other. But there are people who just they can't handle that. They need to know that they are earning more, they have a better social status, they need to know that they're better than you, whatever that means to them. Because the definition would not be the same for everyone. I don't know if those sorts of friendships can work unless you sort of like
Shrink yourself, contort yourself, shrink yourself, become double jointed, put yourself in a tiny and tinier box. But then ultimately that's bad for your own health, your own growth. And it reminds me a lot of the saying that I read a long time ago that says, some people cut off the heads of others to look taller. I thought it was very, very powerful. And the thing is that we all will feel envious at times, right? And we are likeliest to feel envious when somebody is of the same social background to us. So I'm likeliest to feel envious of somebody I went to school with in my same cohort than Bill Gates, right? That's just the way it is, a social comparison, social distance thing. So it's very important for us to learn to grow up and emotionally mature. And by that, it's not just about social benefit or playing better with people. It's about your own heart, your own nervous system, your own brain, your own health and sanity. So maturity is actually the ability to hold the fact that I'm looking at somebody's success and that makes me feel like crap when I look at my own life for whatever reason, and the fact that I'm genuinely happy for them. But a lot of it cannot bridge that, or cannot even say that I'm happy for you, or my life sucks. So what's the easiest way? Tar somebody, cut somebody else down, and laugh and turn it into a joke. And that is not cool at all.
Do you think people recognize that in themselves when they're doing that?
I know some people do that as a deliberate mechanism to make themselves shine the most. And those moments of schadenfreude when something leaks out, right? Or when in some of these friendships, when someone is being complimented, somebody's face literally goes black, and not just once, many, many times. They find ways of, oh, you're this, but you are that. They remind you of ways in which they think you should be kept small, like your past, your social status, your money, or they'll just say very, very sudden cutting things and then start talking about things that are more neutral or more positive. But if this leaks consistently happen, then again, that's a really bad sign.
What I tend to notice online, as you were talking about people putting other people down, what I notice online, and I wouldn't usually share this because I don't think I'm very good at noticing these patterns, but I think I see a lot of people who gravitate to each other and maintain very long-term friendships on some very unhealthy foundations, in the sense that somebody wants to live a life where they do very little, they complain a lot, and they would end up forming giant groups where they promote that kind of behavior. Like, I know for a fact that, I consider you friend, I have other friends. If I were to bitch and moan about my work more than a few times, my friends would turn around and then they will tell me either stop doing that work, find
Yeah.
something healthier, or quit complaining.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell are you doing to yourself? It's not because they're getting bugged by it. No, they're my friends, they're in my corner. It's because they know what this constant complaining is going to do to my motivation and mental
Yeah.
health. But I see this happening all the time, all over the world, where there are friendships where people hype each other up, which is awesome. You are supposed to hype your friend up, but they're hyping each other up over like stuff where there should be accountability, stuff where they should be calling each other out and saying, this doesn't seem like, not because the behavior in itself is unhealthy, but clearly this is doing nothing for you. At least I see it. I see a lot of other podcasters, other people online pointing it out, and yet to those groups, the groups keep growing, and nobody clearly they're not seeing it, and that completely, is so jarring to me. That how is this happening?
Well, misery loves company. One extra person added to your perspective makes it more right. That's what Paulo Coelho said. I think was it in the Pilgrimage, one of his books anyway. And I thought that was maybe so one of the books on being a spiritual warrior. But I remember reading that and I thought, wow, that is so fascinating. And that really hits home hard, which is why, we need people to validate us. And, that but the thing is like, if let's say as you point out, right, like say you're going through a bad time at work. Yes, as a friend, someone will give you space to talk because it's a season, right? We have to give our friends space. Right. But if this becomes forever, like what happened is if your friend's concerned about you and also concerned about your friendship, because they know that if you keep going down this path and complaining nonstop, they're going to get tired, right? So as a friend, it's okay to say, hey, you know what? Like, I noticed you've been doing this for X number of months. It's going nowhere. What do you want to do? So I remember, for instance, like a really close friend telling for some time about their very bad spouse. And obviously, as a friend, I listen because I'm a friend. I'm not this person's therapist or coach. And I listen, and I just said, and I just said that, hey, okay. So after I said, you've been doing this for this amount of time, and then they were actually saying, oh, actually, I don't remember because sometimes things are so good, sometimes things are so bad. So thank you for helping me to see the picture. I'm like, okay. And also because I happen to have an elephant memory, right? So I guess that's also quite useful. And then after this person started to definitively identify their spouse as somebody who is really nasty, really controlling, really manipulative, and doing it consciously and deliberately. After some time, I said, okay, if you have said that you want to exit the situation, as your friend, I have to tell you that you really have to do that pretty soon, because it's not just me, your other friends will get tired of listening to this. And then you're going to find yourself, not necessarily about me, but you're going to find yourself with no social support. And that's going to be very dangerous for a situation like this. So just going to put it out there. And like, for me, I also have friends who have told me such situations, keeping each other accountable, but without meddling, without giving extra advice, but rather saying that, hey, you want me to be in your life and supporting you. This is how our friendship needs to grow healthier. But when we are thinking about the scripts that you mentioned, it's always easier to validate each other and not grow, because growing is hard. Growing takes courage. It's always easier to say, oh no, this is so generic. This is why this thing will never work for me. This is why, this person grew up rich and therefore they can do X, Y, Z. This person was so lucky that they are brave enough to take action and change their lives. I mean, there is all sorts of insane excuses that a person will give to basically justify why somebody else is doing that and they cannot. And of course, it's always easier to keep each other stuck.
Yeah, I think also there's like a global shift. I don't know if I probably shouldn't say global shift. I think it's there in some societies, because I don't see this in India yet. But definitely it's happening where people are treating each other as fragile. Like, how politically sensitive it has become to talk about working out, to talk about eating healthy, because suddenly if you work out, you are fat shaming other people and you are a toxic person, which to me was, every time I talk about it, my mind is blown, because I've talked about it so much because people keep bringing it up, but I still cannot wrap my mind around that somebody could put that kind of interpretation in you wanting to be healthy. Why wouldn't you want to be healthy? And why wouldn't you want your friend to be healthy, calling them toxic? So there is this sort of shift I see in the world where everybody is treating each other as fragile because they want to be treated as fragile. What I mean by that is, I want to be treated as fragile, so I'm treating other people as fragile because I want the same in return. And you would attract that kind of person if you sort of put that out there. So I think there is that issue also. This is one of the reasons why, like, I wouldn't be friends with someone who doesn't call me out on my crap, because then I don't feel safe with you. I would feel safe with you if, regardless of what terminology you use, you call me out on my crap. I have dedicated friend groups that do nothing but make fun of each other. But we make fun of each other, not about appearance or about that sort of thing, but about achievements. But that's not for everyone. That's fine. But what I'm saying is, I think there is a mental health crisis. I know that. I'm very aware of that. And that is true for the entire world, also for India. But treating each other as fragile, especially in friendship groups that are supposed to be, people who are supposed to keep you accountable. These are people we listen to, we actually respect. For them to start treating you as fragile and for them to have no accountability, I think that is dangerous. But what would you tell our listeners? Because I wouldn't do a very good job here, but I think you will at letting them know what is the balance here, because we do want friends who support us, but we also got to watch out for people who gonna sort of allow us to stay down, like just because we had one bad experience or just because we're having a bad season.
Mm-hmm. I think it's such an important point, because we not only outsource authority to other people, but generally there's enough investment and enough credibility that's been invested in a friendship to make them credit worthy, that we are likely to believe them because we trust them, right? The trust currency, the trust investment is very high already. So I think this would be a case where we think about what happens when we make a change. So, you and I, we've all made changes in different periods of our lives, right? Like I can tell you in the last 4 years, big changes I've had is building discipline, working out, which now I'm scared of being called toxic now. Kidding. Working out, having supplements for the first time in my life, taking care of my skin to reverse many rounds of grade 4 acne. So many things, like from not eating excessively more than a man twice my weight, just building up all these different parts of my life for the first time in my life. And so these are the changes that I've made. And this also are the changes that, like all the other changes I made stepwise in my life, progressively, I have seen backlash. Not by everyone, but sometimes I see. But, I have enough clarity of mind, and so because I'm in this industry, to know that when you make a change, someone is going to be unhappy. And sometimes this unhappiness is more about them than about you. And it's going to hurt because you wonder why your friend cannot support you, why your friend is thinking this way, you doubt yourself. So obviously, when we think about change, we want to think along different lines, right? So for instance, if somebody is engaged in a habit that I know is going to hurt them, hurt others, hurt the relationship, then that would be a red flag, right? That will be something I would say, hey, like this doesn't sound very healthy, right? So obvious things would be like somebody is like gaming till they're not eating, they're not sleeping, they're not washing, right? That's clearly something that's affecting everybody's lives, right? Or they're not going to work, so that's bad. If somebody is gambling nonstop, hurting their own savings, or going to big debt, getting fights with their loved ones, then again, that's something that clearly is not good. If somebody is getting drunk every night and their relationships are suffering as a result, their health is suffering as a result, maybe it's something that you can say. Then everything else, like my question here is it any of my business? Is it any of your business? Are you harming anyone? Are you not harming anyone? So are you harming yourself? So if you're not doing any of that, then it's nothing for me to say at all. But the thing is that when somebody goes through a change, then it elicits in us this like unconscious jolt about what's going on in our lives. Like, oh, they are running. I'm not. Oh, my body is changing. And this is contrast, right? So again, what's the easiest way to deal with this discomfort? Put somebody down. And then when we see somebody reaping the benefits of that lifestyle, you might hear really bad stuff like, oh, I think you've got a disorder. I think you might be ill. What's wrong with you? And so maybe I can share with you a little bit about my own story to put it in context,
Yes,
right?
please, yeah.
So like most people during the pandemic, I was very actively cooking. I've always cooked, but that was when I just threw myself on a hyper-focus, making all sorts of projects, down to hand-rolling pasta, hand-cutting pasta, mastering your 4-room pastas, making bread with my eyes closed, breading challah bread. It was amazing. But I became the biggest I've ever been in my life, which again, people will remind me is not big, but for my own standards, because I have tiny bones, it's big. And as somebody with ADHD, and a mouth that just eats to keep myself from boredom, that's very dangerous, right? And I don't feel full easily. I have an insane appetite that, like I said, can best men double my weight. I've done all sorts of competitions with them, and it's quite funny. I still can, but I don't do that anymore. So that was actually my wake-up call, because I was like, you know what, like, enough of this lack of discipline. Just because it's harder for ADHD brain to develop discipline doesn't mean I don't want to not have discipline. So I told myself, I'm going to start small. I'm going to start running. And then obviously I attached that to a dubious life goal, which is the only thing that gets me out of my house when at night to run, which is, okay, I want to wear a crop top all year round, because it's better if I tell you I want to be healthy as an immediate goal, that's not going to get me out of my sofa, right? So I did that. And then the weight dropped. And along the way, I was very, very happy, and I was like, oh, this is great already. I thought it was the lightest I could ever get. And I was very, very happy. But along the way, it became part of my identity. But halfway through, I started getting really weird things. Like I had accusations of having an eating disorder, which totally bullshit. I had accusations that fasting is bad for you. And I know old conventional medical industries always say, oh, you cannot fast, you cannot do this and that. But, I read the studies, I read the books, and and then actually my blood work has gone all the way up to super optimal levels, right? And I actually have got the test results, and I know what it's like for me, right? And I have a life, so I have I implement socially flexible fasting. So I'm on a holiday, if I've got business lunches, I'm going to do them. But then there'll be days when I'm just a bit healthier without being a complete stickler. But then I started getting, oh, are you sick? Do you have cancer? And I was like,
Whoa.
Whoa, where's that coming from? Actually, I look healthier than ever. Thank you very much. So it's a shock. And then they say, oh, why are you sensitive? I'm just concerned. And I'm like, that's not concern. Obviously, sometimes living in a society that's very communitarian, right? I would check myself to make sure that I am definitely not being strange according to this society's norms. So I ask people I trust, right? They're like, what do you mean by cancer? That sounds like a complete and total curse. And then this girl said, I would totally score that person. What do you mean by cancer? Why are you cursing me? And I thought that was so funny. But the thing is that people will say stuff. And when you embark on a change, you have to be aware that some people will not be happy. When your life starts to pick up in whatever direction of growth that you want, there will be people that you will outgrow. It is a sad fact of life.
Yeah, that is so huge. And cancer, that seems a little much, I think.
Yeah. I mean, if you compared my pictures from now versus my entire life, I don't, and I show you my blood work, not even, I mean, even if I didn't show you my blood work, right, I definitely do not look like I have cancer.
Yeah, and I don't think I know intermittent fasting really doesn't work for some people. It doesn't work for me due to migraines. But it's a very personal thing. It's something that only your body can tell you. There are things that work for literally everyone, and they may not work for a certain someone, but that's because their body isn't responding well to it, and that's for them to decide. So I think in those respects, really, you should tell your friend, I will support you. Let's find out how this goes for you. Okay. I have a really hard time giving up sweets. So I'm strength training, which means I'm eating a lot more. But I'm trying to lose weight, which is
Yeah.
very. I still don't know where I'm going with this, but my friends are supporting me. They're like, okay, let's try this now, let's try that now, and they don't. Yeah, that's support. You don't make judgment calls for your friends, especially if your friend is a grown ass person.
Yeah, and I also think that we know that words are spells. I'm not talking like round about the cauldron boil kind of Shakespeare kind of spells, right? Or the Wicked Witch, even though some people believe that way. What I'm talking about when words are spells is that we think about something a teacher said to us when we were 7 years old or 10 years old. It sticks in our identity so many years later. When somebody tells you, I believe you, it removes the shame, it removes the guilt. You fast track into healing. Words are absolutely spells. And as grown-ups, we are not perfect, but growing up means, maturing means that we know we have a responsibility to say words that are thoughtful, are kind, and necessary. So this is not to say, I'm going to be on eggshells around everybody, but rather some things don't have to be said. You don't have to be mean. You don't have to use horrible words or laugh at a person to hide your own discomfort about yourself. That is your responsibility to look in yourself and understand that it's scary, but it's not impossible to get through that. And when you break through, you grow as a person.
That is so beautiful. Do you think it's possible to have all things from all people, in the sense that have like I have friends who I would call when I'm having an anxiety attack, at like middle of the night, where I am like having, usually if I wouldn't call anyone, I would write in my journal or something like that. But if I'm going to call, I'm going to call. There's a group I have.
So that's like your 3 friend.
Yeah, like those are friends
Yeah.
who are no, those are friends actually who have mental health issues of their own. They're very familiar with the lingo. They're very familiar with how this goes. They're not people who are going to be like, what do you mean you're worried about this? Is not something to worry about, stop worrying. They're never going to say that. But then I have friends who are going to be like, what do you mean, this is what a stupid thing to worry about, stop worrying about this, go put on your running shoes, go run. So I have friends like that, and those are the people I call when I know I want to get pumped up and I don't want to sit anymore and just keep talking about this. Those are the people I call. Then there's some things I would go to my mom for, and there's some other things that I would go to my brother for, stuff like that. But do you think it's possible to have friendships? And I will tell you, I'm very clear about what I'm gonna get from these groups.
So, Krati, I think, I think this is such an important point over here. It's the same thing as we expect a partner, a relationship partner, right, to
Yeah.
fulfill everything. I think that's complete and total bullshit.
Okay.
So what I call is have a diversified portfolio of friends. And there's some friends that I will do sports with. And, so even though there have been a bunch of people who say horrible things about me working out, I also have got people who have been watching this, and they also have been getting healthy as well. They're like, oh, teach me how to do this, teach me how to do that. They've been doing that and then many years later, they say, it's partly because I watched your journey and you did this with me. I'm like, oh, I'm so glad that, that I inspired something in you, and that, you are actually liking the outcome of that. So, so those are the friends that I would do sports with, right? They're friends that I will talk to about some things, and some topics, because they have the bandwidth, and obviously ask for permission first. And they also have the ability to understand it, right? The same first principles and ability to look at different perspectives. I have friends I only eat sweet things with. I have friends I only do fun stuff with. So I'm very clear about who I do what with, and I am very happy with that. And I also know that there are people who are not happy about the fact that I have that kind of clearly demarcated roles. But that's not on me. Like, I can't just, with the fun people, I cannot tell them everything about my life, or nor do I tell anyone everything about my life. But I do not want to be guilted or expected or shamed into having to tell people details that I know are not safe for a person.
That is so true. What about alignment regarding values, beliefs, ideologies? What about alignment where all of this is concerned? Because do you think that that should matter in a friendship? Do you think you can have a healthy supportive friendship despite knowing that this person's beliefs are in contradiction to my own?
I think that people are so complex that we all have different beliefs for different reasons. And sometimes we pick up certain beliefs solidify during crisis points in our lives because our world assumptions in our brains get shattered and it changes. So I am incredibly flexible with people's values and what matters the most to them. But then there's obviously some no-nos, right? Like I do not like cruelty, especially intentional cruelty.
Yes.
But then, some people have different ideas about relationships, different outlooks about life, about money, about politics. And I know that those are incredibly divisive things, but I think that these things don't have to be divisive. You can have your own, I can have my own, and we do not have to convince each other about who is more right or who is absolutely wrong. I would think about the Oscar Wilde quote that he wrote while he was in prison, which is selfishness is not living as one wishes to live. It is asking others to live as one wishes to live. So it's not about having to adhere to the exact same beliefs, the exact same luggage brand, the exact same places you travel to, or the same phones, or same and punishing somebody because they don't adhere to that. But rather letting people have certain value systems because it is what they choose. And this doesn't mean that your value systems will not change or their value systems will not change either. It's about the fact that as long as we have a healthy, open discussion when it matters, that's all I really care about.
I think you, in this regard, this is just my opinion, I think you have to know what you will not be okay being a bystander for. I think because like if I have a friend who is cheating on their spouse, if I find out, I will tell them. Now I don't know if that's right or wrong. I don't know. I also don't care. Don't let me find out then if you are a cheater, because if I do, I'm gonna tell on you. So a lot of people would say that that is me being unsupportive, that is me being interfering in something that is none of my business. I don't believe that. So I think you have to be very clear on, you have to know what your sort of non-negotiables are, what your
Yeah.
sort of no-go areas are.
Yeah, what you stand for. And then everything else, is really about, does your political views, who you voted for, hurt me? Okay, of course you might say that, you voted with this person's going to create this bunch of policies, anywhere in the world, right? And, you could get really upset and inflamed by that. And, that to me, that's a long shot. Because no political system is perfect, right? It's all messy. It's very, very complex. It's complicated. And so for me, that is not a reason to unfriend somebody because they voted for something, or somebody has a certain kind of relationship arrangement that is, again, their life, their preference. And as long as they keep themselves safe, I don't really care. I don't judge a person for, like, for instance, what kind of lifestyle habits they have unless they are harming themselves. Then I might have to say something about it if I really care about this person and I just can see the obvious danger it's bringing to their lives.
That makes sense. I think there are definitely people you just do not need to have political discussions with because their opinions are very different from your own.
Yeah.
So maybe you don't discuss that with them and you maintain the friendship with everything else. And I think that makes sense what you just said. Yeah, I think you have to, going back to that point that you made, you have to figure out whether this is hurting them, this is hurting someone else, is this your business, is this not? I think that sort of thing you have to work with that kind of criteria. Tell me about conditional friendships, recognizing conditional friendships.
Tell me more about what you want to know about conditional friendships.
Because I think it's the same for relationships come in so many different shapes now, different forms, and there are situationships that I don't
Yeah.
know very much about what that's all about, but this like it's you can create whatever version works for you. It wasn't always like that. So does that work for for friendships also? Is that what conditional friendships are about?
I think then that would also align quite well with the idea of having a diversified portfolio of friends, right?
Okay.
So, it's like this, like the parameters in which I run this friendship. It doesn't mean that it will not evolve, but what this means is that for now, this is what I do with this person. These are the things I talk about with this person. These are things that I consent to discuss or disclose. And that is okay. You shouldn't feel guilted to having to overshare, especially if that's something very private to you, or you just don't feel safe. It's not to mean that there's a lot of skeletons in your closet or even half a skeleton in your closet. It's just some things are private to us. Some matters we have to digest privately before we talk or before we start to open up. We have to think about them first. And everybody has got the different ways of processing a situation. Some people like to do it aloud to somebody else. Some people do it publicly. Some people do it privately. Whenever it is, we are all different in that sense. And it's about respecting the OS in which you process things.
Okay. Talk to me about toxic feminism and girl gangs, because this is something again that I'm very conflicted about, because I do recognize that these girl boss, all of these girl groups that are formed to promote feminism and to help their friends be stronger, stand up for themselves, like that is what has brought them together. I do see the value in that, because yes, there are women who really do need that kind of support, but we also now see, again, sometimes we overcorrect, and we do see some sort of a toxic side to it emerging. When that happens, there's a lot of dependency, because if somebody has raised you, it is going to be very hard to stand up to that particular person. Like you said, they're going to remind you, remember all of this that I did for you when you were, in that bad place. How do we recognize that? And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I see that more with women than I do with men.
I think that women are basically biologically wired to be more communitarian. So that's how we evolved, right? And women used to raise kids together in tribes. And a lot of our wiring has not evolved to modern day situations, and modern day, whatever that means, keeps changing all the time. So it's very hard to keep up. So as women, banding together has got a function to it. Like there's evolutionary evidence on how, or theories about how gossip serves as a social bond, right? Because people come together and talk is also a way of correcting and policing each other's behaviors. So in that sense, when women stand up for each other, when women, for instance, in meetings echo each other's ideas, it prevents it from being mansplained or hijacked by somebody else. This is great, right? Like, as if everything, I think there's always two sides to the picture. Like we have a lot of mental health awareness, and there's also like generic stuff that's being used as excuses or being misused, misquoted, then it gives it a bad name. So when it comes to toxic femininity, we can see it in the same lens, that sometimes it becomes about, we got to adhere to these values and you're not allowed to think differently. We have to keep you as this person, instead of saying that, hey, that's amazing how much you've grown and I'm so happy for you, or it's like, let's look at how we can leapfrog you if you want to leapfrog into the next level, right? But sometimes it's not about that. It's about reminding this person that they're always subservient to you or they're always subordinate to you. And that is when that is not healthy at all. And that's something that is not just in work communities or business communities, something that happens in cliques. And the one observation that I've had speaking to a lot of clients and friends is that your clique at 15-year-old actually becomes a worse version of that when they're 30, and then when they're 50 and when they're 80. Because the neural pathways get rehearsed over again. So most people don't change. Most people become worse versions of themselves, right? If your habits are continued unreflexively. And so if your Cassie habits started at 15 or 14 or 13 and you're 50, imagine how many years of practice you've had to solidify them and make them worse.
Do you think that, this is a weird question, but I do feel compelled to ask, like, can such groups that have come together because of some trauma or because they are, shaming a particular group, like maybe there are women who've come together after experiencing something violent and now they're on sort of, they hate men, And that is what is, which is very understandable. It's not like I'm not judging that, but I just wonder if that could ever be conducive to growth.
No, I think if you become so absolute and so rigid, unable to see how you've grown yourself or how the world may be changing, how something is not completely black and white. So in this case, not all men are bad, right? There can
Yeah.
be some bad men,
Yes.
but not all men are bad. Just like there can be some bad women, but not all women are bad, right? When you walk on the roads, there's an X% chance of getting into an accident, but that doesn't mean you will get into an accident. That doesn't mean you avoid taking the pedestrian crossing, right? So if you think about that in that way, if you keep yourself imprisoned within something completely rigid, then that does not help your growth at all, especially if you're holding on to it in an unexamined manner.
Do you think if you reach that point, like you join a group because you need these people and they are sort of echoing your sentiment, and it's the sentiment that you need right now to hold yourself together and to survive? You join that group, but then you feel like, okay, I am moving past this trauma. I'm starting to get to a healthier place. Do you think then you sort of, in as part of that group, as you start to not agree so much with their, with their collective sentiments, and you stand up to them, or you correct them, or you walk away, which would be the better option? Because sometimes the consequences are really not good.
Yeah, I think it depends. Again, there's never a right or wrong answer, which is a really irritating thing about talking to me.
No, that's
It's
the best thing about you.
it's like I would take a very relativist stance on a lot of actions because I think it requires discernment to choose. So let's say I'm in a group where any dissent, we're not talking about overt angry protest, any dissent, any small little perspective is not tolerated, shut down, punished, or mocked, belittled, humiliated, okay, then that's a clear sign that this is not safe to raise something. There are some groups where people are able to take different perspectives, even though they might be a bit extreme in their main perspective, in their main standpoint. So this is where, it's important to test the waters in that sense. So if there's a group that's completely rigid and everything is punished, then maybe it's okay to tell yourself that you've outgrown this situation. And this is not to say, just run away straight away, right? Sit down, examine the data, talk to a person you trust about it, talk to your friend you trust, talk to a professional, because, like this has become part of your identity. It's your support group. Sometimes it's your crutch, right? And it's a social vitamin as well. So you have to think it's not so easy just to cut it off. There will be grief. There'll be sadness. There'll be guilt, second guessing, even though your gut might say, hey, you know what, you've outgrown, it's time to do the right thing. Your sense of doing the nice thing, which is not the same as doing the right or the decent thing, okay, your sense of being nice can make you feel incredibly guilty. So it's going to take courage, as with many things about growth. So if you are able to understand that you've outgrown, you see the data, you've seen the patterns, and you make a decision, then it's okay to do that. It doesn't reflect badly on you that you've outgrown something. Don't confuse your sadness, your grief, for being a bad person.
Honestly, if I have a kid, and if my kid is gravitating towards joining any group, unless it's like a arts and crafts group, or it's like it's like one of those groups, then it's fine. But I think any group that's based on any kind of ideology, I would actively discourage my kid from, not actively, but I would probably not want my kid to join a group like that. I Yeah, because I think, like you said, there is no, so many times there's no right and wrong. There's just something, what you are choosing to do, and then there is the other side to the coin, another perspective, another perspective, and another perspective, and that's just how life works. I really don't think like these groups work. We in India, I didn't really have friends growing up, but I would notice like there were groups of kids who just wanted to play all the time, and that's why they
Yeah.
were friends. And then there were groups who were like all about academics, and they would do the homework together. They would make sure, if I don't show up to school, you better get all the notes. And those were there were those groups. It was after I started watching American movies that I realized, dude, there are jocks, and then there are drama geeks, and then there are,
Yeah.
and these are like, I don't know, it's because it's a movie, they're obviously going to show the more dramatic side. They're not going to show the dull, mundane side. So that's why they show a very toxic side to these groups. Like the jocks are bullying the nerds, and the cheerleaders are bullying the drama group, and that just seems like, I don't know. But although that's on shared interests, that is then bringing personalities into it. Like not every jock would be someone arrogant, and you could be a very good looking sporty guy and still be humble and good at math. So,
Yeah, but I think
know.
like to this point, it's a lot about this us versus them dynamic. A lot of
Yeah.
groups can only thrive or survive because there is a them. So I remember one of my sociology tutors saying that the only way we can have world peace is if the aliens are coming to attack us. That's when we will go us versus them, or maybe some people will join the aliens, I don't know. Okay. Like, so, or maybe like us versus the cyborgs, right? I mean, some of us might join the cyborgs.
I'll join them.
Yeah, I think I'll join the cyborgs too. So when you think about it that way, right? Like, so if a group needs this us versus them to maintain themselves, that is often a sign that it might not be the healthiest for you if you decide to grow. Or if a group stays that way because it keeps people in a certain role. So some people are always acting in a certain way, and everybody has to only see that side of them, unwilling to see that this person is not just part of this 15-year-old identity you've ascribed to them. Then again, I think that is a bit gross. And some groups are held together by the fact that there are factions within these groups. So everybody is on their toes, and everybody, is like always like bad mouthing each other.
Okay, let's talk about some of the unhealthy behavior that happens within friendships. We talked about the group dynamic, and what we are essentially talking about here is how there is dependency that is created in the group, and then when you start to grow in an independent way, it is not appreciated in certain groups, and you have to watch out for that. But there's also other things that happen that I want to talk about. Passive aggression, competition happening between friends, but it's not out in the open, but it does create hostility that is unacknowledged. Making fun of others. This one is something I've lived through. Boy, have I lived through this, and this is not fun. Making fun of others, and if they react and if they call you out on it, the group in general, most people would say, don't be so sensitive. Come on. They're just having fun. So talk to me about that, those sorts of behaviors, and the cost of putting up with something like that.
So when it comes to passive aggression, it is again very confusing for your nervous system because it sounds passive and it can be interpreted in a benign or even positive way, right? Because this person is not shouting at me, so maybe they're smiling, maybe they're doing it for my own good. And when you're a person who doubts yourself, or you're in a particularly bad season in your life, or there's enough trust currency that's been invested into this relationship or this group, it is painful to want to see that actually this is not good for me. So passive aggression within that has a lot of ambiguity, and your brain hates ambiguity. That chews up insane amount of energy that can be used for much better things. Even energy to go have a good night's sleep so that your brain can clear off junk, right? That also takes, like resources. So passive aggression is something that people use because they can hide behind this. No, actually, you're too sensitive. Actually, it's benign. Actually, it's neutral. But that is not quite the case. Then we also have things like, when groups, or I call that the subscription fee. So this group is just too high. So, you got to do exact same things. You got to espouse the same values. You can't say no to one or two things. The moment you get dropped. So there's a lot of fear, a lot of walking on eggshells. And, this person might say, oh, this person that I don't like them, and you are expected implicitly to drop this person. Or sometimes you also see that in terms of jealousy or suspicions of your new friends or your other friends. And, it's one thing for me to say that, hey, I noticed that you've been going out a lot with this person, you've been having a lot of fun. That is a fact, right? Like, let's say I see it on this person's stories. Oh my gosh, you guys are going on such amazing holidays, right? And I think that's great. And then it's another thing for someone to tell me, oh, why are you always going out with this person? And then tag to that, this person looks so blah blah blah. This person is so blah blah blah. I'm like, you don't even know this person. What do you mean by that? What? And then again, like as growing up, I found that very, very confusing when somebody would say things like that to me, right? And then go translation would be, oh, they're a bit insecure about your friends, which I now understand, right? And I think that's okay. But let's say, you're seeing like one or two times, it's okay, right? But let's say I'm seeing a consistent pattern that someone is always saying weird comments, casting judgment about my friends that they don't even know. I think that's a bit bizarre for that to be a pattern. Or asking me things like, oh, why you always go out with this person? Oh, how come you're such good friends? It is none of your business, essentially.
Yeah. I sometimes look at comedians, people who are very opinionated. You get to see their personalities online, and it's either that they're opinionated or it's because they're so successful that they're not so worried about what everyone else is thinking about them. Do you think that if you have that kind of confidence, if you are that kind of person, you can maintain subtlety in your opinions, or do you have to be friends with people who appreciate a more blunt approach to life?
I think, again, that is a very relative thing, because some people like directness and bluntness, some people like drama and exaggeration.
Yeah.
Right? So it's almost like their lives are caricatures of, say, a meme page. Some people literally live like that. And if that suits them for who they are right now, sure, go ahead. Like a lot of comedians are brash, direct to the point, because that is their job. I remember Hannah Gatsby in Nanette. She said that the way like a stand-up comedy script is structured is that it has to go to this high, painful inflection point and stay there. And so it's designed to cut, right? And then the question is, are you bringing your professional self, if you're a comedian, into your personal life? Like, what's funny on the stage may not necessarily be funny when it's directed at your friend or your family or your loved one. There's a hell of a difference. So like, I love to watch, for instance, Uncle Roger, right? He's so funny. But that's funny because he's very aware that he's playing on caricatures, he's playing on stereotypes, and and so it's funny in that context. But if somebody were doing that to me 24/7, I don't think I'll be able to take that.
Yeah. You're right. This is a very valid criticism that has been leveled at me by friends. And past few years of my life have been about cultivating subtlety, because I'm a very, very blunt person. What you see is exactly what you get, which I always thought was a great quality to have. But turns out that's not so great when your friend is in a vulnerable place.
But Krati, that direct doesn't always mean that you're doing it in that comedian script that's designed to have that punchline, right? You're not doing it just to have that punchline so that people will get a shock and laugh. This is a completely different thing. So directness is, I think it's something that's like, put it this way, okay? Like, I think some of us fall more into the direct part of the spectrum, some of us fall onto the more subtle or ambiguous, vague part of the spectrum. And along the way, we learn to sand off the rough edges.
Yeah.
And meet at the other point, like meet to go, like some people learn to be a bit more this, some people learn to be a bit more that. And they also learn to adapt it according to context. And
Yes.
It's just, like I was born pretty direct because when I was young, I used to take everything literally. That's the way my brain functions, right? And I had to, in my own geek speak, code for nuance, code for risk, code for failure, uncertainty. And that helped me to understand, I got to just move things a little bit more here and see the spectrum, but and see the context, right? But so, it's really not about, hey, I'm just a direct person, or it's so bad that I am direct, or it's so bad that I'm a bit fake. It's just sometimes the way that we are wired, and sometimes the way in which our family, our schools have wired us to become.
One of the friend that criticized me for it, she presented it as, this is no longer about you. When somebody is, you're holding space for someone. In those moments, forget yourself, forget what you are like. Be there for that person. That's what friendship is supposed to be about. And I think I wasn't a good friend at the time. I was always too direct, always too blunt. And my friends like, but you are making it about you. this is not about you. This is about them. Even if everything's fine with them, but they're sharing something with you, focus on them. And if you don't, there's always the golden rule is always, you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And you've given us like a pretty good checklist. If it is not hurting them, maybe they're recounting something that happened long time back.
Yeah.
If you don't have anything pleasant to add or anything helpful to add, maybe just don't say anything. I think this is subtlety. This is a version of subtlety that I think you have to cultivate. Like you said, work out those rough edges so they don't end up hurting your friends.
Yeah, and it's also about learning the rules of the game in friendship, right? Some people are just automatically very good. So I would share that when I was a kid, I was definitely, I would say, socially awkward, socially obtuse, and just socially incompetent. Okay, and and sometimes people say, oh, it's because nobody taught you social skills. I'm like, no, people were dying to teach me social skills. My brain just couldn't latch onto why on earth would I need social skills, right? So it was very, very bizarre. Like I said, it's a miracle I even had friends growing up, right? Not knowing how to maintain those friendships. And so, like, so it's about, and some people who are just not very good socially might be very good in other parts of life, just like some people who are very good at some parts of life might be not very good at those part of life, might be really excellent socially. So again, it's about, how can I use my current strengths to catch up with what I'm not so good at? So, along the way, we pick up the rules of the game. And so it's not about beating yourself up, but rather learning from that. Because, I can tell you that I spent a whole bunch of my life beating myself up. I mean, I'm Singaporean, I'm Chinese, I'm Catholic. Put that all together, bam, okay? It's a Molotov cocktail. But then, like, it's taken a long time to teach myself to genuinely, emotionally not beat myself up instead of just logically, because being good to myself is neuroscientifically shown to be good for my health or my performance, right? And actually, like, I think I read this quote that said that beating yourself up is not going to change your past. And it's also wasting your energy. So, I like to think about myself in terms of a battery. My brain is a battery, my body is a battery, right? So if I'm draining that battery, then it makes no sense. So over time, I just learned to beat myself up less. So, when I think about all the rules of the game I had no idea about in different parts of life, there's a point in which we sit down and tell ourselves, you know what? If somebody was born with the same set of cards, they would have the same OS too. Okay? And the fact that my OS today is a lot more advanced, not perfect, but advanced compared to the prototype version of who I was, is actually something to celebrate.
Yeah.
And use that celebration, that feeling good, that feeling, that pride, that sense of efficacy that I can do it, that I'm brave enough despite my fears, right? Use that to launch me forward to becoming a better version of myself. Whether it's for myself or somebody else, this is the fact that I am growing. And I would have made a lot of mistakes in my life along the way, things that if I look back, I'm ashamed on. But I remember what Alain de Botton said. He said that if you're looking back on your younger self and you don't feel embarrassed, that's a pretty bad sign.
Yeah, absolutely. I shared with you how if I find out you're cheating on your spouse, actively cheating, lying, sneaking around, if I'm friends with your spouse, I'm going to tell them. And if I don't think I should interfere, maybe there are kids involved, I cannot be part of that dynamic. So I had a friend who was doing something they shouldn't have been doing. And I had to walk away because again, there were kids involved. And I think me not taking their call sort of made them feel very guilty, sort of woke them up to, what is actually what they're doing. They came clean and the relationship blew up for a time. They're together now, but it blew up for a time. And I was there for my friend. And I really had to bite my tongue because at no point could I was literally the only person they had left in their corner. Because, whenever couples break up, people pick sides. And rarely do people pick the side of the person who was cheating. So I was the only person in their corner at that point. And I had to learn not once did I, because there, you go through the grief process where you also have this one stage where you're trying to justify what you did and why everyone else is just not seeing what you're seeing. You really have to bite your tongue. You have to let them have their moment, let them rant and rave. And I had to learn that sometimes the friendship isn't about, it's about accountability, but it looks very different sometimes. Sometimes it's really letting your friend turn their life into crap, pull apart all the pieces, and then sit in it, and then you sit in it with them. Like it's something you have to figure out as you go forward, but it's not easy. But I think there are very clear signs when your friendship is unhealthy, like people who come together because they're cheating. you know
Yep.
I remember reading on Reddit about this girl who was in sort of like they were having brunch together, and one of them was like, oh yeah, I'm seeing this person, this very married person said, but the heart wants what the heart wants. I fell in love, I couldn't help myself, it's love. And they came clean with their partner and they walked away. But the general consensus within that group was that, yeah, even if you're married, but you fell in love with someone else, that's cool then. That gives you some sort of moral superior ground. And maybe, and that person was like, I had to walk away from that group because I so did not agree with them. And I was like, yeah, that I don't understand how you sustain friendships through something like that. But again, it comes back to clarity of your own values, your own self. And if you're going to continue to be part of that group, because if that group is awesome in other ways, then perhaps you can ignore that bit and continue, because I think that's part of being an adult.
I think what you're saying that if the only string holding together this group is this shared rationalization or reason for doing what they're doing and nothing else, then you don't believe in that, then it's okay to exit. But if this group is held together many different strings and and net positive, and you don't have to discuss this thing that you don't care about or that jars you, then it's okay. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's happening more and more in this world right now. There's so much polarization and everybody's getting involved in pretty much everything. People no longer say that this is none of my business. Not going to get, my life is going in this direction. Let me just keep going in this direction. None of my business what's happening over here. Everybody, because of social media, internet, people feel compelled to get involved in everything. People are very opinionated, which is probably good for society in general, but then you have to figure out what you signed up for, what you do not want to be a part of, and what is holding the friendship together, because it is very insidious when you are constantly sharing ideologies and you are coming together to support each other. That could spiral very quickly.
Or basically what I'm hearing is converting each other to become more polarized, fanatic, radical versions of this belief. And that's the only thing that's going on over here. So it becomes a very strong us versus them issue. And it's just not very healthy for your brain, because we know that when we become radical, we start also not liking other people. We start becoming completely intolerant. And this intolerance tends to splinter or like be a cancer that starts to migrate to different parts of our lives. So it actually shrinks our world. And when we keep seeing things as us versus them, your threat center switches on. And I can tell you for sure that when that happens, when your amygdala switches on or becomes too active, it's hijacked your prefrontal cortex, then you go into tunnel vision mode. And think about that, not just for one day. It's happening for 6 months, 1 year. Those muscles are going to be so well practiced. They're going to be the Hulk.
Yeah. And tell me if you disagree with me, but I think it also means something so far as our personal standards are concerned. Because if you are constantly hanging out with a certain type of group, certain type of people, it's either going to raise your standards or it's going to hurt your standards. Do you agree with that?
I think so. I mean, like, there's this really famous quote, right? I can't remember who said that, but basically, you are the sum average of the 5 people you spend the most time around. And those 5 people may not be people in, like, you see face to face, flesh to flesh, right? But, it could be people that you spend a lot of time talking to, texting, video calling, whatever it is. Because your friends' values, either they are infectious. So if I'm always around people who don't take care of their health, I'm likely not to take care of my health, or I'm likely to feel bad about taking care of my health, because you're going to, even though the science shows X, Y, Z, even though the experts say X, Y, Z, it's easy to doubt yourself because what you're doing is the odd thing out. And these groups could punish the changes that you're making. So, if you're friends who have certain values, you're friends who always see the world as a mean, horrible place, I'm always going to have this kind of level of success only, or people who are successful are bad. Eventually you're going to espouse that. So, so I remember when I first moved to England, I was very excited about having 4 seasons for the first time in my life. And people will ask me, oh, England, oh, what do you think about it in the winter? And I remember for my first few years, I was saying, I love winter in England. And they looked at me like I'm crazy. And I said, I get to buy gorgeous winter coats. I get to wear my gorgeous boots. And I get to see snow. I get to feel cold. I don't have to sweat 24/7. I think that is a great thing. But then every day, oh, it's such a great day, such a great day, started to seep into my consciousness. And one day I woke up saying those words. And then I started feeling like crap. It took me some time to connect dots and realize that, it's me uttering the same words over and over again and then feeling like crap about winter. So I decided I'm going to reclaim winter. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to remember what's good about it. And I'm not going to pretend that I don't like some gray days, right? I'm not going to make everything all Pollyanna-ish and positive. But you can see that just from a social, cultural perspective, when a certain phrase, a certain belief is uttered over and over again, that can affect the way you see life, the way you see yourself, the way you see your worth, your potential. So the people, the company that you keep is absolutely important, especially when we're talking about this main company. And it's also really important to be clear, like, there's some people that you hang out for certain reasons. Like, let's say, some people I know, they might be part of, say, a cycling group, right? And that's the only thing they do is they do sports and then they share a meal. And this person might not be even close to the cycling group. And that's fine because they understand the parameters of this relationship. And they've got friendships and other relationships that support them or that influence them in bigger, deeper ways. That's all right. If I have groups that are just pure fun and nothing too personal, great. Then I'm aware of those parameters. So they will not be the top 5 people who will become the sum of which of who I'm going to be.
Yeah, this is such a huge point because sometimes friendships just happen organically and you're not doing those calculations, those computations in your brain. You just met a cool person, you're hanging out, and now the friendship is getting deeper. Rarely do we sort of sit and wonder or sit and, yes, I would use the word calculate, just how this friendship is impacting my mental health, my motivation, the goals that I'm picking, my efficacy. I think that is something, I think you make an amazing point, and we need to be mindful of that because I think if you hang out with people who are, and again, this is happening so frequently now, if you're constantly hanging out with people who are making it okay for you to rant and rave and complain and just, think life is shit, life really, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy then. And
Definitely.
How can it not impact your mental health also?
If you're hearing all those words being echoed over and over again, they get stored in your memory, in different parts of your memory. And it's hard not to tear yourself away from that because something repeated too often becomes the truth. Because a lot of things, our brain has no capacity to consciously process every single thing that's going on in our life on a day-to-day basis. So what does it do? Our brain goes through all these shortcuts and heuristics, got this different software, metaphorically, that goes, okay, this goes into this part, that goes in this part. But that doesn't mean that it's not affecting us, it's not accumulating in bad terms of compound interest.
So true. The other thing that I brought up with you was people in friendship dynamics where we are making fun of a person, like that is just how our approach to friendship, and the other person is not supposed to get hurt because if you get hurt and you react and you are the party pooper, you're the person who clearly doesn't know how to take a joke and you're made to feel bad about it. I think that is something else that happens a lot in friendships, and the person making fun is the cool person with the excellent sense of humor, the comedian in the group, and the other person is clearly too sensitive. But that's something else I think I would like to talk about. And I think I would like to put it out there because we need to guard ourselves because it can be very difficult when everyone expects you to be a good sport. It almost feels like you don't have the right to feel your feelings.
Yeah, or you don't have the right to not be mocked. I mean, that's insane, right? It's like people saying, if like asking somebody, what do you expect in a relationship? And they say, oh, I expect this person not to beat me up. I'm like, how is that expectation?
Yeah.
That's not even a hygiene factor. Or some people say, I expect to be treated respectfully, right? And I think to myself, how is that even an expectation? That should be a hygiene factor, not to be treated disrespectfully. You shouldn't even have to articulate that. So sometimes we find ourselves in groups where the dynamic has solidified into very obvious roles. Somebody's the cool, fun one who can say shit, and but if you even microdose that same amount of humor back at them, you're in trouble. That's because you are disrupting the power dynamic, and it becomes shaky. It threatens them, and it's like you are acting out of place. It's kind of like, imagine back in the day when talking about, say, the Chinese emperor, like the eunuch talking out of line, the prince talking out of line, or the same thing in the courtier in like when Machiavelli was writing of the prince, right? The courtier speaking out of line. But the thing is that we are not acting that way. There's no like obvious power hierarchy that is institutionalized in this case in a friendship group. But however, this become unspoken norms and expectations. And when you are expected to act that way and not be able to deviate, then you have to consider that you are in this, and if this is the only thing that is your function in this group, then you have to consider the possibility that that is your only role in this group, to become the stooge. And becoming the stooge also serves this group as a wider purpose because it's a way of deterrent and punishment. Because it tells people, if you act out of line, this is going to happen to you. So in social groups, there's a phenomenon where you think that, okay, if I remove this person from this role, then everything's going to be fine and dandy. This person is a troublemaker. But no, these groups are structured in a way where nature abhors this vacuum. So somebody else is going to fill that vacuum and become the new stooge, the new scapegoat, the new whipping boy. And then, and then you think, okay, if I just remove this queen bee, everything's going to be fine. But again, because these groups are structured where the power dynamic or the function or the role or the purpose is not exactly very healthy, right? And we can agree that this is not healthy for your brain, your nervous system, your heart, or just generally your growth as a human being or your self-worth. So remove this queen bee, somebody else is going to fill that vacuum.
That is a huge, huge point. And I didn't even think about that. That's huge. Yeah. If the group is structured in a certain way and that way in itself is unhealthy, there is no, I highly doubt that because a group would have a few members, I highly doubt that all of them would change to something else. Then maybe walking away is your best option in that scenario.
Yeah. Especially if you realize what's going on and you've outgrown it, or sometimes we play a certain role at certain points in our lives, or a certain chapter that's going on in the bigger backdrop of life, of the world, right? And that's okay to outgrow this. And there's no blind loyalty, because sometimes, as women or men who are brought up to be nice instead of kind, nice instead of decent, we are trained to overfunction and overgive. And in this case, we misplace loyalty. So just because somebody did a small kindness for you, you overpay it by an infinite number of times. And your loyalty to this person or this group is stuck at, oh, but this person did this for me. You forget exactly why. And you are also taught to keep repaying and repaying. And so you feel guilty for even daring to think you have outgrown this group. And actually, in this sense, there's no loyalty or no gratitude lost.
And I feel like I should point out, because at some point during the initial part of our conversation, I shared that I have a group of friends. We always make fun of each other. I want to clarify that. By no means am I condoning that. This group was formed with the very clear purpose of pushing each other to do certain things. Like, we've shared our goals with each other, and we want to achieve those goals in 2025. Like, we're very clear with each other. And the purpose of this group is to make sure that we stay on track. So humor is our go-to tool to cope sometimes with life. So we're always funny. So the purpose of that group is to sort of motivate each other through humor. It is at no point is it cruel. We don't make comments on each other's abilities. There are no personal mockery going on here.
Okay.
At no point does anybody say, "Oh, you're not capable of this." We
Right.
make fun of sort of the ideas we use to hold ourselves back. Very, very nuanced. But I just want to make sure that I don't send out the wrong message where you think I'm condoning that sort of behavior. I am not, because I've been at the receiving end of this kind of bullshit. And no, it's not cool. It is so not cool, and it can make you feel so desperately lonely when you're parts of such groups. You think you have friends, you don't.
Yep. And that's actually worse, to feel lonely when you're in company of people.
Yes, it's way worse. You should rather be alone with a good book than be around people like that, because you talked about how friends that we spend a lot of time around will affect how we perceive life, or our standards. They also impact your self-image.
Oh, totally.
You do not want to be someone who sits and takes it,
Yeah.
because that is not the approach you want to bring to life.
Yep. Because eventually you become this person who thinks, I can take any crap, I can tolerate any crap, and people will throw crap at you. So you become what you believe. And a lot of our thoughts, a lot of our ideas of the world, ideas about ourselves are completely invisible. So if this is solidifying as your identity that you're not even aware of, or embarrassing to even point out, nobody wants to say, I'm here to take crap, right? Or, or I'm just like a stooge, a whipping boy or whipping girl, then you start to attract and magnetize more of this. We call this repetition compulsion in psychology, where something that has hurt us, has caused some kind of trauma, whether it's a big T trauma or a small t trauma, starts to make us go into similar situations because your brain is trying to gain resolution from the initial hurt. Except that your brain is unconsciously throwing you into situations that are similar. And if these are similar situations, then of course you're never going to heal. You're never going to get this resolution. So what happens when this keeps repeating 5 times, 10 times? You think it's a curse. You think it's a bad magic spell. You think it's your identity.
Yeah, I have 2 questions there. Like, if somebody is constantly gravitating towards people who are not healthy for them, they may be wonderful people in their own right, but their idea of friendship is not great, or at least not healthy for this particular person, but they keep gravitating towards them, because that does happen. Like you said, repetition compulsion. Some people just keep, their whole life can be summed up in terms of patterns. What personal quality do you think somebody needs to cultivate to be able to pick out good friends, to be able to attract healthy friendships?
Boundaries. You need to have very strong boundaries. And boundaries isn't just about, oh, I know how to say no. It's really about, one, actually knowing you have the permission to say no, and two, having the skills and the scripts to say no. And then, of course, the ability to believe in that, which is linked to the permission bit. So that means that if you express your boundary and this person does not adhere to that, or does not consistently follow up on that, instead they mock you or make you feel like crap, then it's a sign. So it's a sign that this person is not healthy for you. So the ability to have boundaries is very important. The ability to have standards in what kind of people you want to hang out with that are closest to you. So we're not talking just about acquaintances, like there can be some people I might eat with that I don't really care about, but it's just like I'm supposed to hang out with a friend of a friend because I'm doing a favor or whatever. That's different, right? They don't know my innermost thoughts. They don't know a lot of things about me. I'm very clear about this demarcation in my head and in my behaviors. So that's cool with me. But then when we're talking about deepest friendships, be very aware what your boundaries and your standards are. Do not be afraid to raise the standards and walk away. It's about cultivating that thick skin, about understanding that a lot of these things is not personal. If a person is whipping you for making a change in your private life that may not even affect them, then how is that their business?
Yes. Now, this other question that I have, I think like this is for everyone, but especially for people who have mental health issues, especially where they need a lot of support. If you identify that the support you have in your life has too high a cost to it, and you want to sort of have nicer, better, more supportive, healthier friendships, do you walk away from, especially people when they're making transition from one phase of life to another, we will often notice, especially if you've been in depression for a long time, at least this was my experience, you would notice that you've attracted a certain kind of crowd that is kind of where your depression sort of makes it possible for you to not see that these are not the greatest of people to have. And then you're making a transition. What would you advise a person to do? Should they walk away from all of their friendships, start fresh? Do you think that's even possible, where we sort of choose to be solitary? Because solitude is not comfortable for a lot of people.
It's not good for your brain either. Like
Yeah.
your brain actually undergoes discernible, measurable changes when you isolate yourself. So that's a difference. So we're not talking about going towards completely black and white and isolating yourself. Okay. So we are thinking about how, okay, like what stops a lot of us from moving on or even making a change to our terms of interaction is guilt. It's fear of rocking the boat, and it's also loyalty, right? Loyalty to this misplaced, overblown gratitude that to this people or to this group. And actually, you're not wrong in saying that there's some sense of gratitude and loyalty, because this person or this group served you for the person that you are, that you were, for the person, for the life situations that you found yourself in. So that's not to say they're completely bad. You're not going to erase them or pretend that there's nothing good about that, especially for that old version of yourself with a different kind of idea and perspective and different OS. So be very clear about that. And that doesn't mean that you need to carry that forward if the string that is holding this friendship or this relationship or group together is just this one thread that is not going to serve the next versions of who you are.
So we've reached the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching and for sharing your time with me. The video description will have the link to all the resources mentioned during the conversation. And if you would rather listen to these episodes, then you can find Experimental Podcast on most podcast platforms. If you enjoyed the video, please do share your thoughts in the comment section. And if you want to watch more, subscribe to the channel, please, and do hit the notification bell. I will see you again in the next video. Till then, please do take care of yourself. Bye.